know a part of you wants to hang here. It's nice knowing how every stage ends. No surprises, no twists. It always stays the same.
Whoever came up with this idea for a story adaptation went deep inside of that bag, and I mean hand in bag straight through. Salutations and fist bumps, folks. Welcome back to The Grid. We have a lot to talk about as usual for these episodes, and it all starts with the opening credits, specifically with the previously on X-Men, as we usually get with the X-Men series, but this time it's with Jubilee.
Previously on X-Men.
Please don't hurt me.
But something that I also took notice of at the same time is that Storm does not say previously on, and she hasn't said it in the first 3 episodes of this series yet. And knowing that usually means that something is going to happen with that character, it kind of bummed me out just a little bit. But even with that, we get a feel for what this episode is going to be targeted towards, specifically the relationship between Jubilee and Roberto, because we start with his introduction, and if you don't remember from the previous episodes, he was possibly captured the same way that Jubilee was in the first episode of the X-Men animated series ever in 1992. Also, keep in mind as you watch or rewatch, if you are doing that now, that in the first episode, he mentions that he does not even want to be himself, let alone a mutant, which is something that the writers toy with inside of this episode towards the tail end of it. Now, this time inside of this episode, when the Marvel Marquee starts, we hear a very familiar jingle, the MCU fanfare. But this time, it's a 90s retro guitar riff that has a very similar resemblance to a video game soundtrack, something similar to Super Smash Bros. And I know this is a little bit before that time, but Super Smash Bros. Is a banger for me, and it actually came out in the 2000s. But that's what that sounded like to me, at least the first 2 times. Every time that I watch it, that's what it sounds like, okay? But inside of the credits, we do get a reanimation of the first time that Jubilee encountered Mojo. And my eyes could be deceiving me, but that kind of looks like Longshot in the background. And we also are officially introduced to Forge in his X-Men suit, which means that either he was a part of the original team in a very distant situation, or he will be later on inside of this series. And they have now switched the character model of Madeline Pryor out for Jean Grey's. We also get a glimpse of the reanimated Inner Circle featuring Emma Frost from the 1994 episode, The Inner Circle. And we also get another glimpse of Charles yet again. So at this point, this is the second time that we've seen Charles inside of the credits. So that usually means, or to me, it means that he is going to show up somewhere along the line inside of this series, but where exactly, really up in the air right now. But he's definitely, probably, most likely going to show up. But as the episode opens, we are greeted with the familiar sound of coffee brewing on a coffee pot. And if you grew up like me, that was every Saturday, because I had to do that, I'm sorry. But on a more serious note, this also shows a very 90s flair in the way that this coffee pot is actually displayed, because it looks very similar to a Mr. Coffee coffee pot.
Are you okay?
I'm a little messed up.
Yeah, and also in the background, you can hear some 90s alternative playing as well. But the song that is specifically playing is not very distinguishable, at least just yet. And almost on cue, Bad Boy Gambit shows up and tries to smooth things over with Rogue, and is yet again upstaged by Magneto when he figures out that all Rogue really wants in her coffee are 3 sugars. And Gambit has been around her for, I don't know, way longer, and he doesn't know that? Because this man had no idea that she didn't want cream in her coffee and just wanted 3 sugars. Come on, man. And we are now officially back on schedule, slightly, with our X-Men formula, because Magneto, as the leader of the X-Men, starts barking orders that everyone needs to head to the danger room for their drill.
Report to the danger room for drills. We must be ready should Mr. Sinister resurface.
You were scared, huh? Don't be scared.
Which officially opens Act 1, where we later find out that it's Jubilee's birthday and she's turning 18 today. But though things are supposed to be festive and very lighthearted at this point because of her birthday, Magneto is still on edge because of the whooping that he took at the hands of Mr. Sinister by way of Goblin Queen, because that man got his butt whooped. And it's in classic format that Beast would pull his card right at this moment, because he's the voice of reason in the room that reminds everyone, including Magneto, that it's Jubilee's birthday and she's the youngest member of the team. So it's more than likely that she's going to want to do something other than training today. I mean, wouldn't you on your birthday, especially when you're 18? And then Wolverine tries to come to the aid of Jubilee while backing up Beast. And when he does, he calls this man a Rogaine ad. If that ain't the most 90s insult I've ever heard. But old Stoneface Magneto doesn't hear any of that and starts speaking about his childhood again.
Someone's daddy didn't get him a pony for his sweet 16th.
My parents perished when I was a child.
But this time he speaks to the fact that he was an orphan, which, by the way, if you don't know or don't remember, so was Storm. And maybe that's the reason why they went that direction in terms of making Storm save him instead of Rogue, because when she actually loses her powers in the comics, she's saving Rogue. Enter Jubilee, and festive as she may be, the drills still need to be done. And as any teenager would, or at least I did when I was 18 or around that age, she ain't trying to hear none of that, especially like I said earlier, on her birthday. And she would like to go to the arcade, and I don't blame her, because arcades are a magical place filled with wonderful sounds and button mashing. Who wouldn't want to do that? But this also got me thinking, if she's 18 now, then when she entered or encountered the X-Men for the first time, she was about 11 or 12 or somewhere around there, because the animated series officially starts in 1992, and now we're in 1997, so you do the math. Then in 90s kid fashion, she slams the door and starts going ham on the parentals, in this case being Magneto, because she has the proverbial scream in pillow moment when she's pacing her floor inside of her room. You know, the one that you scream real loud and you don't really say a whole lot of anything when you're screaming. That might just be me. But as Jubilee has her adult moment in this particular situation, we then get a glimpse of her room, which is decorated like every 90s teenager that I remember, because as she rants, you can see a calendar behind her that really looks like Milli Vanilli. And to the left of that, we see a faceless poster of Bruce Lee, and then a TV with a VCR connected to it. Further left, we see a passport, or what looks like a passport, which makes sense due to the fact that the X-Men travel a lot, but it also doesn't, because they can fly, and they also have their own private jet. But go off, animators. Then on the other side of her room, we see what looks like Polaroids of some of her X-Men teammates, or these could just be very decorative postcards. But at this angle, it's very tough to make out, so we'll just say yes. Then to the left of that, or those, we can see a star with a circle around it, which very much resembles Captain America's shield. Then again, further to the left, we can see a thunderbolt, which to me resembles the thunderbolt earrings that Storm used to wear, because in the second episode, when she loses her powers and she leaves her uniform, you can also see next to that a pair of thunderbolt earrings. So maybe this might have been a gift from Storm at one point. Then on the nightstand, you can see a digital clock, which probably wakes the entire mansion when that thing goes off. If you know what a 90s clock or 90s digital clock was sounding like, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because those things could literally wake an entire block. And if you could sleep through that, bruh, you are a different breed. But then next to that could either either be a digipet or the switch that turns on the lamp. But truthfully, if it's not a digipet, I would have liked it to be, because that would have been just dope as heck. And did she just call herself a Big Mac?
Fries. I'm the birthday Big Mac.
We are then introduced to this video game that she's been standing in front of the entire time, which then Roberto says that her playing video games might make or break their situation. Bruh, do you understand the amount of dopeness that you have in front of you? Like, bruh, if you don't pick up the sticks because you don't understand the level of dope to have your lady actually be a gamer in front of you, and you never mind, man. What are you talking about? But the Motendo, which by the way, the name is a play on Nintendo, but the design of this model seems like a cross between the Sega Genesis and the Super NES. Oh, and we also get a sighting of a classic boombox, which is sitting next to a plushie that looks like Donald Trump. But when the Motendo comes to life after Jubilee says its name, the infection that happens between Roberto and Jubilee not only looks like the thing that happened to Nathan Summers in the previous episode, it also is a resembling factor of the Matrix, because you would have to get plugged in from the real world into the Matrix, in this case, the Motendo. And though, by the way, just in case you're fact checking this, the Motendo situation does look like the Matrix, but the Matrix did not come out until 2 years after this current timeline, which is in 1999. But again, we do get subtle nods inside of this entire sequence to the Matrix, which includes the ringing phone inside of a phone booth, which then takes them to a different part of the Motendo Matrix. And the music that accompanies this behind it actually does feel like or sound like a dubsteppy techno mix.
Wait a second. It could be a trap.
So, very similar to a Matrix soundtrack as well. But as Roberto and Jubilee run around like chickens, trying to get away from the Sentinel, the Mega Man crew shows up, aka Friends of Humanity. But again, it's just way more fun to call them the Mega Man crew. And of course, they show up with their Mega Blasters attached to their arm. But later on, they show signs of being NPCs, because when Roberto and Jubilee are hiding from them, they just keep going, and as long as you break line of sight, they have no idea where you are, which again is very 90s in the way that this was designed. But this man, Roberto, is so vain.
A lot easier if you just used your powers.
What if there's cameras around? My parents could see me on TV.
That he doesn't even want to use his powers to get them out of the jam that they're in, because he believes that his mom is going to see it. I think she would rather you be alive, my boy. But then from the phone booth, we are taken to an earlier form of Genosha, where we see a few more mutants that we haven't seen for a while. Jubilee also then mentions that she was trapped in this particular situation once before. Jubilee then name drops Hot Topic, and if you don't know, that's a very big 90s situation in terms of fashion, because they were huge in the 90s in practically every mall, and now they're still around, but they've kind of switched to a different model, which in this case is Box Lunch. And again, fandom galore, which by the way, Box Lunch, holla at your boy. I mean, look, I had to shoot my shot, okay? Because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so I had to do it. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and the breakdown so far, go ahead and hit the like button. Fist bump the like button, if you will. I'd appreciate it. Then enter Mojo, which by the way now puts us in Act 3. So at this point we have now finished Act 2, and that began inside of her room. Just saying. But in this moment, this opens Act 3 of this portion of the episode, because it tells us who will be the big bad of this portion of the episode, which at this point again is Mojo. But this Mojo has considerably lost some weight, which Jubilee actually pokes fun at. But later on, we do get Fat Mojo, the character model, later inside of the final boss battle. But also inside of this conversation, we hear Mojo say that he got a little nip and a little tuck, which that is actually a show from the early 2000s, which ran from 2003 to 2010. But if you aren't familiar with Mojo as a character, let's refresh that or add some color here for Mojo. So, Mojo is a powerful interdimensional being who rules over the realm known as Mojo World, and he is part of a spineless race of beings known as the Spineless One. Now, he often gets his entertainment from placing mutants inside of death traps pretty much and fighting their way out. Slightly think of him more of a weirder looking Jigsaw, but this is something that he makes mention of and shows an image of Wolverine fighting his way out of that situation. But if you were looking for him in comics, he first appears in 1985's Long Shot number 3. Then in the conversation had between Jubilee, Roberto, and Mojo, Mojo mentions that TV ratings are really down in the third quarter because at that time, that was when video games were starting to hit the scene and kids like myself and everyone around my neighborhood were spending their free time playing video games instead of watching TV. But Mojo feeds on the mindless brain energy that is produced when you're just sitting watching TV or mindlessly playing video games, which, by the way, that's not really a mindless activity if you're really doing it. But that's what 90s parents always thought because, I mean, that's what the news portrayed. But the fact is, you bought it. It was your money that produced it for me.
Are you okay?
I'm a little messed up.
But also in this conversation, Mojo mentions Dazzler, who supposedly at this point has a gig. But we won't go into that because Mojo doesn't. But Dazzler was the other big name apart from Jubilee that he was trying to get into his Mojoverse. Oh, and by the way, she is, or at one point was, an X-Men who discovered her powers at a high school dance. But another nod to the Matrix happens here when Mojo mentions stakes.
Well, I don't want to say something scary, like if you die in the game, you die in real life, but stakes.
Then Mojo's line about cutting them like a one-hit wonder.
Before I cut you like a one-hit wonder.
That's extremely 90s because there are countless amounts of them inside of the history of the 90s, and I can't even go through all of them right now in this video. But specifically, definitely, Milli Vanilli would be on that list. Now, it's time to play the game.
Time to play the game!
And as Mojo continues to jabber on and on about the glory days of Jubilee, he does bring up a very good point because having the ability to replay your own glory days would actually be a lot of fun, but not if your life depended on it. So not that part. Then we get glimpses of popular 90s shows, Who's the Boss, A Different World, which is actually shot with the correct promo image that was used inside of the actual TV show, which by the way is a spin-off of The Cosby Show, and this version actually includes Forge. So yet again, another nod to the fact that he is somewhere around or in the history of the X-Men, somewhere inside of this season possibly. Then we also get Divorce Court, which by the way is the Grandma Afternoon special. Just saying. At least for me. And the only thing that was missing inside of this lineup was All My Children and General Hospital. Then as the game starts, we see a start screen modeled after the popular Konami X-Men game from 1992, which is being broadcasted in a more modern gaming cafe, which those didn't really appear that way until after the 2000s. So they're blending a few things between the 90s and the 2000s here. As the game loads though, we see a few character models to select here. Obviously, Jubilee, then next to her is Colossus, then Roberto, and next to him that could be Ilyana Rasputin, aka Magic. Next to her, what looks to be a character model of Logan, or that could be Cyclops as well. It's hard to say in this particular situation from this angle and the lighting on the actual character as well. And then at the end, we have Nathan Summers, aka Cable. And they then load up inside of the dystopian street level, which for me further confirms their tie-in together, because that is exactly how both of them were captured and then obviously ended up inside of the mansion with the X-Men. Then as the actual level loads up, we get a 16-bit video game theme of the X-Men theme song. And behind them, we then see a pixelated version of the X-Men roster. Fat Mojo then enters the chat and sends the heroes to the Savage Land, which in the comics is also a place where Magneto and Rogue actually have a little bit of a situationship that ends badly later on. And remember the Hot Topic lady from before? Yep, she shows back up and gives Jubilee an extra life inside of that particular stage in the game, which Mojo is very adamant about calling her a bug in the system because she should not be in the system at all, because she was a beta situation that should have been wiped out a long time ago. But when Mojo is having his rant, we also see Spiral, specifically the actual Spiral, who looks to be captured by Mojo at this point, and she says that this is what happens when you kill the entirety of the tech team, because you can't fix bugs if you don't have a technical team at all. But his defense, he did it because they couldn't find the bug and take it out. You're kind of shooting yourself in the never mind. But I don't know how many of y'all actually have had to take out a bug inside of software. It is not for the faint of heart. I will say that and leave it at that. Now, let's fast forward a lot into the boss battle, which is very 90s retro-esque, because if you think of like Super Mario or something like that, it's very wait your turn and then shoot the boss after they've hit or thrown 3 or so objects in your vicinity, and then you just wait your turn to actually do yours. But in this particular situation, when we hit the boss battle specifically with Magneto, this is the beginning of Act 4, where we also meet the futuristic Jubilee, who, by the way, is voiced by the original voice of Jubes. What? But she describes that she was a part of the beta testing phase of the game, which, by the way, every game should have. But usually after you've beta tested stuff and you have everything that you need, you wipe everything out. But she found a way to bypass, or found a back door inside of the game so that she could go through another portion of it and still stay alive. So she has been reproducing or redoing these stages over and over and over again, as you can tell from her wrinkles and her hair.
Note the hair and wrinkles.
But the heart-to-heart had here, which that hit here, right here. It is exactly how I'm sure most of us 90s kids feel in terms of looking back on things that we did do or didn't do and think we could have done it better, because these writers were hitting on every 90s kid emotion I could possibly have. And yes, it would be awesome to have the ability to replay some of those things and make it different. But in the same token, it's also mentioning that life is about living it and actually being inside of the moment with the present people that you love and taking risk when you can. And more specifically, take really big risks in life, because that is where the fun actually is. And then as we come to the latter part of this act, Roberto finally uses his powers after 3 episodes, technically 4, but definitely 3 episodes. Bruh, it took you this long to figure out that you should be shooting people with your arms? Because bruh, you had one job. But he then gets the girl, so I guess we're okay at this point. You could have been doing this. All right, now let's move to the second part of this episode, which uncovers the fact that Storm will not get her powers back in this particular episode. But in this portion of the episode, the X-Men formula is hard to make out because it is slightly blended inside of different parts of this episode. But I got you, because the beginning, much like inside of episode 2, is, like I said, blended, because the first 2 acts actually happen really close together, but slightly reversed. Because first we get the introspection of the 2 characters, and specifically in Storm's relationship with Forge, where we also then learn more about Forge and his powers. But in the same regard, we also hear how Storm now feels about her current life after losing her power. He then offers her bison chili, which by the way sounds delicious, but it's also a play on what he offers in the comics, which is a form of chicken soup, herbal tea, and broth. Then as they ride their horses, this reads as a sort of training ground for Storm, because it is at this moment that she is becoming one with the elements, but on a different level, on a human level now, which is also the same point where she mentions the owl that shows up inside of this segment. And we also saw that same owl at the beginning or the opening of this segment. We then hear Storm mention that the winds of this area are not moved by the moon as it would be around the entirety of the earth, and that they only go eastward, which could suggest that Storm is experiencing something that she either made up or someone else is controlling. Then as we head back inside on the poster board, we see Forge's soldier tags and a picture of a different version of Mutant. Next to that, the Grand Canyon, and then a photo of Forge before his accident. And then when Forge says later that it helps to get outside, I would actually very much agree with that, because that's how I finish a lot of these breakdowns. Because when I'm stuck on what I should focus on specifically inside of an episode or inside of anything that I'm breaking down, I usually take a walk outside to clear my head and then come back. Then, after spending some time in Forge's Urkel transformation chamber,
What is the UTC, the Urkel Transformation Chamber?
Storm then heads back outside to test her powers. And as she reprises her statement from the first episode when she says,
I am Storm, mistress of the elements. Rise, winds, and move the desert sands.
I thought that that was going to mean that she was going to get her powers back, or at least it was making me hopeful that it was going to possibly, even in the slightest inkling, happen here. But yep, that pitted stomach feeling happened again. Marvel, y'all are toying with my emotions right now, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. It ain't right, you hear me? Then as we hit Act 3 of this segment of the episode, which by the way quickly leads into Act 4, we uncover Forge's secret, which if you don't know, that is the fact that he actually created the technology that is used to curtail mutant abilities. But he could only, in my mind, only do this because he is one as well. And I know his power is mostly geared towards his intellect and the things that he can tap into with his brain. Basically makes sense that he would be the person to make this, because he understands what it would take to actually stop a mutant to do their power or have powers in the first place. So he would probably have been testing it on himself to see if he could tap into the recesses of his mind like usual if he's wearing one of these collars. But he says that he does that or created that technology because he technically needed money to fund his own rehabilitation of his limb. And then when Storm finds out, now look, again, Storm is my favorite, but this was an anticlimactic moment when she finds out that he was the person that actually made the collars, because when she slams it down, it doesn't actually break all the way.
You, of all people, should know the perils of trusting those in Washington.
It's like, oh, okay, that was cute. Then Act 4 of this segment shows up when Storm smacks Forge in the face after realizing that he was the person that created the tech.
What is the 5 fingers say to the face? Slap!
He even calls her a goddess even without her powers. That man is truly in love, which then sends Storm upstairs out for a ride on a horse. But then that is quickly turned on his head when she falls back through inside of the ceiling of the cabin that they're currently in, which again, that further tells me that someone is keeping track or doing something to this moment, possibly even her mind, or there's someone else controlling this entire situation altogether, because this slightly happens or resembles what happens inside of the comics in Uncanny X-Men 186 when Storm or Aurora actually falls inside of the mansion or the penthouse that Forge has inside of the comics. It is very similar to that feel of this particular situation. But the big bad in this segment of this episode is the owl, and that is then fought at the end when it actually throws Forge from like a rag doll. So the actual big bad battle here was not a successful one by the mutants in this case. But again, I have to drive this point home. It seems like if it's not Forge that's currently doing something with his own technology in his home, and it's not a dream sequence of Storm, which that could also be the case as well, someone else is controlling this entire situation. Now, this just hit me, but could that someone actually be? Nah. But oh, as they cut to the credits, take a look at the team members of the X-Men that show up here. Most notably, Jean Grey and Bishop. But at the end, there's an extra space for someone else to join the team. Who do you think that actually might be? My guess? Cable. So if you have been following the breakdown so far, you can probably already tell that I was not a fan of the ending of this particular episode. However, I am still going to hold out hope that Storm will come back with full power very soon. And I mean very soon, hopefully in the next episode. That's how soon I want this to happen. But if nostalgia now has you in a chokehold like it has for me these past few weeks, and you want to keep going down that lane, go ahead and hit this playlist up here. And you want to go from the start of the episodes from X-Men 97 to now, go ahead and hit this playlist. And until next time, y'all be smooth, blurred out.